Okay, this is where we left off yesterday. So I think I've got a story to tell you. All right, this is Ra, the sun god, and he ruled Earth before he became the sun and rose up into the heavens. He's also called Re, he's also called Amen, he's also called Atan. Now, there was a prophecy. Any child born from Nut, who's the sky goddess, at any time during the year would overthrow Ra. So Ra cursed Nut. He forbade her from getting pregnant. So Nut goes to Thoth, the god of knowledge, and she asks him to reverse the curse. But he can't reverse the curse, but he comes up with a plan. So he says, I have a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel. So he challenges Khonsu to a game of checkers. Anybody that's been watching the Marvel TV shows Moon Knight knows who Khonsu is. And so each time Thoth won, Khonsu gave up a little bit of his life. And after a while, Khonsu stopped playing. So there's 360 days in a year. And see, Thoth took the life given from Khonsu and traded it for 5 days, which he added to the year as holidays. So before this game of checkers, there was only 360 days in a year. And then Thoth added the 5 days to make it 365 days in a year. So that means that Nut can start making babies on those extra 5 days because they're not actually part of the year. So during each holiday, Nut gave birth to different gods and goddesses. Well, one of those is Osiris, and I want you to know who he is because we'll be running into him later. He is the god of order and justice, and he later becomes the god of the dead, the afterlife, the underworld. Now, the Egyptians were religious to excess. Their concern for immortality bordered on obsession, and almost all monuments and artifacts directed toward this goal of immortality. Now, what two things is he holding here? One looks like a hook, and the other looks like a whip or something. That's called the crook and flail, and it's almost always associated with Osiris. And you see it a lot in Egyptian art. The shepherd's crook stood for the kingship, and the flail stood for the fertility of the land. And I think it's the crook is what guides and rewards, and the flail is what pushes and punishes. So in this little illustration here, the crook is like the carrot that helps guide people to something, and the flail is like the bat that he's using to hit the horse, which is it punishes it. So both of them modify people's behavior, one through reward, other through punishment. And again, you see this a lot in Egyptian art. So Osiris and Isis get married. By the way, they're brother and sister. So brother marries sister. We're going to find this a lot in mythologies. And Set and Nephthys get married, and they are brother and sister. And Osiris, he wants to be a good guy, and so he just wants to help people. He taught humans how to do agriculture, He taught them how to bake bread. He taught them how to brew beer. He taught them the arts. And this is, I believe it's Set. Yeah, Set becomes jealous of Osiris. And the more people loved Osiris and Isis, the more Set wanted to destroy them. Long story short, Set traps Osiris in a chest and threw him into the Nile. Long story short, Isis rescues the dead body of Osiris, hid him in the reeds, and her plan is that with the help of Thoth, they're going to try to resurrect him long enough to conceive another child. But Set gets there first and he cuts him up into pieces. There's a hand, there's a leg, there's a foot, and he throws these pieces all over Egypt. So even if you found a piece, where's the other piece? And then you have to go all over the whole country and find all the pieces in order to put them together. Long story short, they found all the pieces except for one. I'm not going to ask you to guess which piece it is. It's the piece that makes babies. All right, it's his member. And so in one version of the story, she made a new one and attached it. In another version of the story, she used a magic to consume his sexual energy. Anyways, she brought him back to life long enough to do the deed. All right, we can even consider that like necrophilia. And from their union, Horus was born. And Isis hid him until he was old enough to challenge Set. So I want you to know who Horus is. Write down his name. It should be in green up here. When Horus gets old enough, he turns into a badass and challenges Set to a duel. He wants to avenge his father. Remember that Set cut up his father and threw him all over Egypt. And their fight goes on and on and on. And their fight lasts for years. Eventually, Horus wins over Set. And Horus is now the ruler over mankind and the universe. Here's what I want you to know from the story. When a man becomes Pharaoh, all right, Horus rules over Egypt. When a man becomes Pharaoh, he rules over Egypt. So how can a man and Horus both rule over Egypt? Well, Horus's spirit goes into the man. So the man, the Pharaoh, is Horus. Horus is the Pharaoh. Does that make sense? All right, so Horus rules over Egypt as the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh rules over Egypt as Horus. So they become one. All right, and so that's what I want you to know from that story. I also want you to know that the Egyptian Empire lasted a long, long time. Here's how long the Egyptian era lasted. Cleopatra, who was the last pharaoh of Egypt, the last ruler of Egypt, she is closer to us than she is the building of the pyramids of Giza. There are fewer years between her reign and COVID than her reign and the building of the pyramids. Isn't that insane? So that's how long the Egyptian Empire lasted. Okay, there are 4 periods to the Egyptian Empire that we're going to look at. There's pre-dynastic, there's the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Are we done with this slide? All right, moving on. So let's first take a look at pre-dynastic art. And the first artwork we're going to look at is this one right here. So this is a ceremonial palette. It's not normal. Normal makeup palettes are much smaller. The Egyptians prepared eye makeup on these palettes, and the eye makeup helped with the glare of the sun. Both men and women wore the eye makeup. Football and baseball players wear eye makeup to keep down the glare of the sun. It's the same thing. And the makeup was put in the circle. Let's see, this has got to be. So here is the size of it, and it is a flat object. This is the side view. All right, there we go. The makeup is put into the circle between the necks, and it commemorates a historical event. It commemorates the unification of Egypt under Narmer. And this object is symbolic of the transition from prehistorical art to the formula for figures we would see in Egypt for the next 3,000 years. All right, take a look at this guy right here. What are some of the things we can say about him? He's wearing a crown. Which crown is he wearing? Is that Upper or Lower Egypt? Did I hear it? Upper, right. How can you tell? The bowling pin, right? He looks like he has a bowling pin on his head. Also, the other thing I want you to notice is how big is this guy? Is he bigger than everybody else? What does that mean? It's more important than everybody else. What do we call that when one person is bigger than everybody else because he's more important? Starts with an H. Anybody find it in their notes yet? All right, that's all right. We're going to move on. Hierarchy of scale. And I'm pretty sure that'll pop up in these notes here. All right. All right, like I said, the king is bigger than the others. He is a deity, and it is a composite view. It's the front view mixed with the side view. We have the front view of his shoulders. We have the side view of the hips and the legs, and the side view of the head, and a front view of the eyes. The falcon is the symbol of the king dominating the land. All right, and the mace up here is used for the next 3,000 years. It's also referred to as the smiting pose. All right, what's he going to do with this guy? He's going to bash him in the head with his mace. All right, he's holding on to his hair, and he's going to bash him in the head. All right, this guy right here is the sandal bearer. Like we said before, it's the white crown of Upper Egypt. All right, with a falcon, and also this is the enemy is subjugated before the king. On the flip side, we have the goddess Bat or the goddess Hathor up here. Now, Narmer, what crown is he wearing here? Yeah, it's the red crown of which Egypt? Lower Egypt. And once again, notice how he is larger than everybody else. And then the dead are all piled up over here. So this is the king's army marching in uniform, and look how disciplined they are. And then the bodies of the dead are over here. And by the way, they are decapitated. And then we have these mythical animals with these long necks, and these long necks are quite intertwined. And then down here is a bull crashing through the gates of the enemy's fortress, and it's said that the king is the bull. and it shows off his strength. All right, so this is low relief and it has registers to it. Low relief is like a coin. You know, it comes out just a little bit from the wall, and low relief is also called bas relief. I want you to write that down. BAS is pronounced ba. It's pronounced like bah humbug. High relief comes out really far from the wall and has deep undercuts. And on the palette of Narmer, we already pointed out the two different crowns. One is the Upper Egypt and the other is the Lower Egypt. These are not dinosaurs. These are mythical creatures. These are serpopards. And they are the symbol of reunification. They are subjugating the land, and the symmetry is keeping order and balance. Again, we have the hierarchy of scale. The enemies are tied and decapitated. Their heads are there between their legs, and there's ties. Their elbows are tied to the torsos. And this is showing what Narmer will do to his enemies. And this right here is a hieroglyph of Narmer's name. Up in the upper corners it looks like a human face on a bull's head. That's either a bat or Hathor. And then down below is the bull knocking down the walls of the city. And that bull is most likely King Narmer herself. All right, so let's take a look at some pre-dynastic architecture. All right, so we will be looking at pyramids, but first, pyramids started off as what's called a mastaba, Mastaba. And the second stage of a pyramid is a step pyramid, which is basically a series of mastabas that are stacked on top of each other, and they get smaller and smaller. And then there's a bent pyramid we'll get to, and then the epitome of pyramid building are the pyramids at Giza. But let's start with the mastaba tombs. This is early Egyptian architecture. And Egyptian architecture starts out as being very simple, and then it gets more and more complex. So these structures are mostly solid. Looks like there's a door right there, but these are not rooms inside. That's all solid rock and dirt in here. There might be a little room right just past this door, but everything, all of this is solid. You also notice a couple of holes in the ceiling or in the roof. Those lead down to shafts, and the actual tombs are down underneath the ground. So a tomb is like a house for the dead. And these were used by pharaohs before 2667 BC. And they were also used by nobles in all periods, not just the pre-dynastic, but all the way through the New Kingdom. Again, like I said, there'd be a small room, like a small little room where the door was, but the rest of it is solid. what a mastaba looks like on the outside. Here's another mastaba. And you can see all these mastabas in rows over here. I want you to know who Imhotep is. This is our first artist of the whole year. Our first individual that we know who is a creator of things. All right, and he is the royal builder for the King Dozier of the third dynasty. He's the pharaoh's chancellor and high priest of the sun god Ra. And he is the first known artist in recorded history. And he developed the stepped pyramid. All right, now if we look at Dozier right here, which is the guy on the right, what are some things we can identify with him? Like you can see, like what can you tell me about what he's wearing on his head? What is this? It's the what? Yeah, it's the unified crown. Yes. So what can you tell me about the two different parts of the unified crown? What's the red part symbolize? Lower, right. And the white part then would symbolize the upper. And then what is he holding in his hands? What is he holding right there and right there? The crook and the flail. And the other guy, what is he wearing on his head? What is that called? Nemes. That is correct. All right, now I like old horror movies, and so Imhotep. I need to fix this. It's bothering me. Okay, so in the old 1930s horror movie, The Mummy, Imhotep is the name of the mummy. All right, and but we're not talking about that Imhotep. All right, and in the 1990s movie, he was also called The Mummy is also called Imhotep. We're talking about the architect that was for King Dozier. So we're going to go to Saqqara in Cairo, next to Cairo. And here we have the stepped pyramid of Dozier. And this building, the pyramid, is not the only building that is here. This part of a big complex of buildings. And that is called a necropolis. Necro means what? I mentioned earlier when Isis was having relations with the dead Osiris, that was called necrophilia. Dead, right? It means dead. And polis means what? It means city. All right, this is the city of the dead. Ready to move on? All right. Yes, sir. Yeah. All right. This complex will impact all royal memorial monuments made after this. It has 15 entrances, but 14 are fake. And it has many new innovations. For the first time, the material used was not mud brick, but instead carefully cut stone. It's the first mortuary structure in stone. It's the first step pyramid instead of a single mastaba. And it's the first to combine both mortuary and ritual buildings. And it's the first to pair functional buildings with dummy ones that couldn't actually be used. So this site was originally a mastaba. That's the original plan, was to make a mastaba. And then they created a second phase where they built three more mastabas on top. And then the third phase, they built more mastabas on top of that. They just expanded it out, all of these, and then they were able to build more mastabas on top. So as each mastaba was built, it would get smaller. So the stepped pyramid is kind of an accident. It was supposed to be a mastaba for the king when he died, but when he didn't die when he was supposed to, or when the mastaba was finished. So they built another, and he didn't die, and again and again. And it's composed of mastabas of diminishing size. It took them 20 years and 20,000 workers to complete this stepped pyramid. Now, what I want you guys to do is to compare the stepped pyramid with the ziggurat. How are they both the same? How are they both the same? Say it louder. Yes, they both have levels, and the levels keep getting smaller as they go up. Do you see that? Visually, they're very, very similar. How are they different? What is the purpose of the stepped pyramid? Right, to house the dead pharaoh. What is the purpose of a ziggurat? It is, and both of them are religious purposes. What's the purpose of the ziggurat? Say it louder. Yes, to put that temple up higher to the gods. It raises a temple. Is a ziggurat a tomb? No, there's no dead at the ziggurat. Is the stepped pyramid a temple? No. All right, so they look very similar. They have different purposes. All right, this original core constructed of packed rubble and covered over with finished smooth limestone. Here are a couple of chapels here and here, and this gives you an idea of what it would have looked like at the time. And these chapels are solid without any interior space. It looks like they have a door, but there is no door, and there is no space inside these buildings. They are solid. They are dummy buildings. Okay, and once again, I want you to know the parts of a column. I want you to know the capital, the shaft, and the base. We've already been on this, but here's a new term. I want you to know what fluting is. Fluting are these vertical lines that go up and down the column. And here at the stepped pyramid, we have what's called engaged columns. How are these columns different than columns we've seen before? Right, they're embedded into the wall. That's correct. So we're going to go inside of the entrance right here, It's what it looks like. And these are the columns that we see as we go into the entrance. And as we go in, the columns are attached to the walls. By the way, this is from Assassin's Creed. I think they did a really good job of showing this. All right. All right. Do we have any questions of anything that we covered so far in Egyptian art? All right. So let's go to. All right, so much art history and never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum and let's look at. We're still in chapter 3 and it's part 2. We're going to the Old Kingdom. All right, just a reminder where Egypt is in Africa, and we're going to Cairo. And when we look at Cairo, you can see the Nile River begins to expand into different tributaries. And then the area that we're going to be looking for is just on the edge of Cairo and the desert. And look at that. Every time you see photographs of the Great Pyramids, it looks like it's out in the middle of nowhere. But the city of Cairo comes right up against the pyramids. All right, so the Great Pyramids of Giza, I have seen it spelled Giza. I've seen it spelled Gizeh. I've seen it spelled Geza. So you can spell it any way you want to. You can spell it Frank if you want. All right, so that's the city of Cairo. That is the tallest one, the largest pyramid. It's called the Pyramid of Khufu. This is the Pyramid of Khafre. And then this is the Pyramid of Menkaure. We're ready to move on. Anybody need more time? All right, so these are the 3 great pyramids of the of Giza. Khufu, he ruled from 2551 to 2528 BC. Khafre ruled from 2520 to 2494, and Menkaure ruled from 2490 to 2472. It took 75 years to build these pyramids, and they are the oldest of the ancient wonders. Are we good to go? Does anybody need more time? All right, so we're going to look mostly at the Pyramid of Khufu. It is the oldest and the largest, and it is mostly a solid mass. There's nothing inside. It's all rock inside, with a small exception. There's a couple galleries and a burial chamber, and it's 454 feet tall. All right, so if it has a chamber on the inside, what was in the chamber? What do they put in the chamber? Or who do they put in the chamber? It would be the pharaoh. It's the burial chamber of the pharaoh Khufu. And then they would have buried with him all his wealth and things that's needed for the afterlife. So they buried a chariot with him. They buried all kinds of gold. They buried food with him. They buried everything that he would need for the afterlife. Now, the chamber is empty, and it was looted almost as soon as the funerals ceremonies ended. And they would bury these pharaohs with all their treasures in the uh, the pyramid, and you can see the pyramid for miles around. Basically, it's a big advertisement to thieves as treasures buried here, and so it's kind of, I don't know, funny, or it's kind of like disappointing, or I don't know how to feel about it, but that these tombs were robbed as soon as they were finished. So after a while, they just stopped building the pyramids because they would get robbed as soon as they were finished. So there's no. That's the reason why there's not very many pyramids. All right, it's 450 feet high, and originally it was 480 feet high. It consists of 2.3 million blocks of stone, each weighing 2.5 tons. When Napoleon was in Africa and looked at these pyramids, his mathematicians calculated there was enough stones to build a wall 1 foot deep and 10 feet high around the circumference of France. That's a lot of stones. And it is aligned with the cardinal points north, south, east, and west. So here is the entrance right here. That's the old entrance, and then we have the new entrance. And people can go and visit and go inside. This gives you a sense of how large the stones are. And then a fun view from above, and we can get closer and closer. And so here are the tombs on the inside. There are some air shafts that go out to the outside. There's a grand gallery here. The king's chamber is here. And then there is another entrance that goes down into underground, and then there is a chamber down there. Here is another view of what it looks like. And then this is what it looks like on the inside. Now, the whole point of architecture is to get height. And the Great Pyramid broke all kinds of records for height and size. And it was not broken until, I think there is, yeah, hit the next slide, until 1311 with the Lincoln Cathedral. So it stayed the tallest building for 3,800 years, which is impressive. So I know what you're thinking, all right? How do they build the pyramids? Well, if you watch the History Channel, they'll tell you it's aliens that built the pyramids. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories on how the pyramids were built. So the first conspiracy is that aliens built the pyramid. All right, and then another conspiracy is that Jewish slaves uh, built the pyramids, but according to the history of memes, um, the Jewish slaves did not build the pyramids, and the earliest known Jewish presence in Egypt wasn't until 1,200 years after the building of the last pyramids. So the fact that the Jews built the pyramids is debunked. Right? And it was not built by slaves. Everybody that built the pyramids were paid for their work. They were workers, and all citizens in Egypt had to do community service for the empire. So when the pyramids were being built, everybody did their community service at the pyramid site instead of other locations where they usually did their community service. So laborers were paid and fed better than in their daily lives. Also, uh, if you're wondering how they built them, they built them from the ground up because it would be impossible to build them from the top down. All right, so let's look at how they were built. These orange spots on this map are quarries. So the stone that was used to build the pyramids was locally sourced. There is some stone that was used that was imported from far away, but most of the stone was used. And you can see this is the quarry. So builders dug down. You can see how far down they dug to get their stones and dig them out. And this is kind of what the process looked like. So they would build these, or they would cut the stones into these blocks and then break them apart. And one way that they used to break them apart, do you see over here that they've made a crack in the stone? They put these wedges of wood into the crack and then they pour water onto the wood. How do you think that helped? What happens to wood if you add water to it? Expands. All right. So the expanding wood would cause the cracks to crack larger, and then they're able to get some tools in there and turn and break the stone into these blocks. Then they would put these blocks on rollers. Then they would carry these blocks up these ramps. And here is one person's idea of how they would take the stones up these ramps. They would have stairs on either side, these big posts, and they were able to pull down on the ropes, which meant that the ropes pulled up on the stone and taking it to the top. And then the slope, here's an idea, the slope would get taller or the slope would get steeper and steeper as they got closer to the top of the pyramid. Once they would put the stone at the top, then they would set it in place. So here we have ramps going up the side of the pyramid, and where they could turn the stone around. But then on the outside of the pyramid, on the very their outer shell of the pyramid, they put this white limestone. So the pyramids were originally this bright white color. And then when you go and visit, you can take silly photographs. Okay, now we're going to take a look at Khafre, and all these pyramids have these causeways. And the causeway is like a road to other areas of the necropolis. And then we're going to take a look at the Sphinx right there. So from the causeway of the Coffre, you can see the Sphinx. And what I kind of want to point out is that all of this has been dug out. So most of the Sphinx is below the ground. It was not built, it was dug out. So they didn't build it from nothing. They just cut away all the extra stone. How are we doing on time? Oh, yeah, we're gonna leave. So let's stop here with the Sphinx. We'll come back to the Sphinx tomorrow. Any questions about anything so far? Any questions about assignments? Soft talks?
I'm having trouble getting into JSON, like the search bars.
Are you doing it at home or at school? And you're following all the steps, I assume. All right.